Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, September 24th, Issaquah City Council Committee Work Session. Council members Winterstein and Hunt are excused. And we are going to start with agenda item ID 0301, Central Issaquah zoning for Old Route 10, East Gilman Boulevard, and intensive commercial areas with Trish Heinonen.
You hit it then, right? Okay. So this is an ID for you all. And the purpose is to talk about the appropriate zoning for the two areas in Central Issaquah that were removed from Central Issaquah through the District Vision's moratorium project. And so tonight we're going to present different options for you to think about and the pros and cons, and we're going to talk about a proposal for how to go through the decision-making process for you all, and then find out what questions you have and identify items that you would like us to have ready for you when and if this turns into an agenda bill. Okay?
All right, and I'll just mention that if any members of the public wish to speak about this issue this evening that are here or that will be here by the time we take public comment, I will give folks 3 minutes each at the end.
Great, great. The policy questions with this item are what zoning would be appropriate for these properties given that they're no longer in Central? And then the second one is when the council removed these properties from Central, did you anticipate a downzone of these properties as part of the action? These are the purple, I guess. The purple areas are existing designation retail is the zoning. And the ones that appear to be floating above I-90, those are intensive commercially zoned, and those all, the ones with the numbers were all the ones that were removed from Central through the Vision moratorium project. The background is, you may recall, May, you ended the moratorium by approving the district visions, and it included the 15 parcels zoned intensive commercial, 39 parcels zoned destination retail. Of course, that prompted the need for zoning changes, so we worked through those to figure out how to do those. And a reminder that both areas were given an upzone in reduced setbacks and a greater amount of impervious surface when they were upzoned in 2013 with the adoption of the central standards. So before that, the destination retail's parcels were zoned retail, and the intensive commercial were zoned intensive commercial, but they were under a different set of standards through IMC 18. And so both groups of parcels were given an upzone when Central was adopted. We've had a lot of public outreach for this. All the property owners were notified, and those within 300 feet of the parcels were notified. PPC had a public hearing and several sort of work sessions, not only with the property owners, but with the public to sort of work through and deliberate what would be best for these parcels. So we've had a really good discussion on this before coming to you all. We could go into the options if you want. Here they are. They're also in your packet of materials. The first column, intensive commercial, this is what they're zoned right now. This is the standards that they have for the intensive commercial parcels that are all north of I-90. The other version, another option for them is they could all be changed back to the intensive commercial that's in the IMC, the Issaquah Municipal Code, Chapter 18, which is less impervious surface, less height, and less, and some setbacks, side yard, front setbacks. The pros for changing it back to the old zone, the previous zone, we couldn't think of any. Maybe you guys can think of some, but we couldn't think of any pros of going backwards. But the con would be that it takes a lot of the development potential from those parcels, and we have so few parcels in intensive commercial anyway in the city, and there's a lot of really important uses that are housed there for our city that we it seemed rough to actually take development potential from those, from the very few parcels that we have. The third option is a hybrid. It leaves the height and the impervious the same, but it also gives the setbacks. We heard from the property owners that they were really comfortable with the setback. They sort of wanted a little bit of a separation from their neighbors, specifically because of the parking, the way the parking is done and some of the uses. They were really more comfortable to add back the setbacks that they had lost in Central. So we sort of made this hybrid to sort of fit what the property owners were hoping for, and so this is there for your thoughts and questions. The other one, destination retail, the first option is what they have now. Those are the standards. And as with the other one, the pros are, of course, if you don't change them, that the property owners are happy to not have their zoning changed, because that's just status quo for them. They like that too. And the second one is to go back to retail, which was their previous zone, which again would take development potential from them. And we couldn't think of a good reason, a pro for that, but you all may come up with some things to add to that. But and it does limit some of the uses that could go there if it went back to retail. So we made for the option 3, we did another sort of a hybrid where we mixed up the zones. We only gave them one setback, and that would be the front. The height is the same, impervious is the same as they have now. But we call it mixed use because it seemed some of the property owners were worried about the name destination retail, because some of them felt they weren't destination and they weren't retail, and they just thought that was kind of a misnomer. So we thought mixed use sort of was a better umbrella name for all the uses that are there. So that was the title of option 3. Okay. And something came up when we were during our outreach and our discussion is there's a parcel sort of south of Bohm's. It has a little star on it. It's the Bavarian condominium, and it's zoned destination retail now. Used to be zoned retail, and it's 34 condos on about 1.5 acres. They're darling. They're right up on the street, and there was the question of, do they fit with mixed use? Do they fit in retail? They're next to residential, right on Crescent there, and they have access on Dogwood. So it's not access on Gilman where, you might get a lot of trips and traffic. You actually have to come around Dogwood to enter, and that sort of came up as maybe an anomaly in this area. So we sort of pulled that out to say, what do you think? Do you have any issues with it, or should it just go with the rest of the parcels on either side of it? So we just pulled that out as something that was brought up to us, and we thought we should bring it up to you. The next steps, if you should choose to move this way, and again, part of what we're asking you tonight is what process you're comfortable moving forward is. If you're comfortable moving it into an AB, it could go as early as October 15th and then go to Land and Shore. And then November 1st, Land and Shore could review it and perhaps take action on the 19th, and that would allow us to meet the deadline of November 30th. Which is when we're supposed to have the zones changed for these.
Yeah, going back to your chart previously, I have a couple questions.
Which?
Yeah, so either one, I guess most of those seem pretty reasonable. The one that kind of sticks out to me is impervious surface from 65% to 90%. That's a big jump. And so on the other ones, it seemed like you hit pretty good compromise. That kept that at maximum impervious surface on both of those, and just wondering a little more on the logic behind that.
Right, for intensive commercial now, they are 90%. But if we were to revert back to their previous zoning, it would go back to 65. And so we weren't as comfortable with that, thinking that it takes a lot of their development potential away. And so and we have very few intensive commercial properties, and so we thought that perhaps 90% isn't so bad in that area, that it's a good thing for that zone to be able to use that kind of development potential. Oh, here he comes.
And how about for the?
If I can add a little bit, council member. So impervious surface limits are really about stormwater runoff, right? I mean, so if you look at the city zoning practices, our older zones have limits, like Old Town right now has a limit of 65. And what we heard from the Old Town Task Force is that is a significant disadvantage to areas like the Highlands and Central Issaquah that has something more like a 90%. So from a staff and a technical perspective, there's no reason to limit the properties by impervious surface because we don't have a stormwater issue that we're compensating for. And so allowing the impervious to be at 90%, there's no reason not to do that from our
You're saying
perspective.
because you have a very adequate stormwater system in both those areas.
Right, and because the entire city's under NPDES Phase 2, there's certain detention requirements and release requirements regardless. So, you know, it's basically, you know, you have to meet the standards, and if the impervious, right now it's an artificial limit by capping it at 65, and so that's why we're suggesting increasing it to 90.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ray.
There we go. 3 questions. You can take them in any order you want.
Oh, 3, okay.
Number 1 is what kind of input do we get from the property owners in intensive commercial? What kind of comments do we get from neighbors?
Councilmember Ray, you want to maybe try the next one over and turn that one off and see if you're getting quite a bit of,
You're buzzing.
it's your magnetic personality.
He's got that one turned off. No problem.
Emily has the touch. Okay, let me try this again. So 3 questions. What input and feedback do we get from the property owners? What input and feedback do we get, if any, from people who neighbor the properties? And then maybe best to start with the last one. What can you define the uses that are applicable in intensive commercial?
Okay, uses, the uses in intensive commercial outside and inside of Central are pretty much the same. They're the more noisy, manufacturing, a lot of traffic, often truck traffic and auto dealership kind of things, distribution, those kinds of things are in intensive commercial. Some auto repair. I mean, it's just a great collection of all those things that a community needs, but often folks don't want them to maybe be their direct neighbor, but everybody needs them, kind of thing. Does that help with the?
Yes. Then I want to talk a little bit about in Central, where do we have intensive commercial also?
Oh, right now, when we removed the 15 parcels, we left the parcels of IC that are directly abutting East Lake Sammamish Parkway and 221st to stay in Central so that they would stay under the Central standards for all the design criteria that you all just adopted for architectural and urban design, parking, all that good stuff. We wanted to keep those regulations for those that abut East Lake Sammamish and 221st.
Right, and then
For the property owners, we had some great discussions. We had 3 with PPC and the IC, several IC property owners showed up and destination retail owners showed up. And they all were hoping to at least get the development regulations that they had now. Several of them talked about wanting to expand and invest in their properties, and they were worried that if we went back to what they were before 2013, they would lose the opportunity to stay viable and to make improvements and expansions on their properties. So PPC asked that we had even another session with them and to sort of work through what they were hoping for their future and what the city was hoping for the city's future, to see if we could come up with some ground that worked for all of us. So we had a really dynamic, really positive discussion with all the property owners that attended. And then the neighbors, there were some neighbors there that just wanted to know what was going on. They didn't seem to have a problem with whichever way we went. They just were curious what was going on. Sure.
Can I ask, for both intensive commercial and destination retail, did you get a sense of sort of the distribution of preference amongst the options from the public comment that you received?
Most of them lean to 3 on both zones to do the hybrid.
Other questions right now? Councilmember Ramos.
Yeah, so you kind of left us with something hanging there, and that's a Bavarian condominium. Just that that's something that came up, and you didn't take us anywhere. So I'm trying to figure what more we can do with that. I understand it comes in from a totally different side. There's, you can come in from Dogwood either way. It's currently condos, which is not retail, but you have a recommendation or a thought to go with that other than just marking it's kind of...
Right, well, it would fit into mixed use because it's certainly part of the mix of uses as residential. It fits into what we would want for that area because it's residential and it goes with the other, residential to the south. It's a good mix. We're not sure that anything big, for lack of a better term, would go there because of the access is so limited to Dogwood. And plus, if you looked in the future, if someone had to buy 34 condo owners out to put something there, it's a hard thought that something could happen there. Oh, I'm getting the hook.
Don't go far.
I'm saying
I was just going to go back to this map. So this is the zoning map, and the area that we're talking about. So right now, all of this used to be destination retail, right? And so whatever we decide here is kind of maybe or maybe not all moving in the same color, whatever that color may be. This is the property we're talking about, and the issue is, even though this is all residential here, this is residential at a fairly low density, right? And so what we're talking about, if we were going to put a straight residential zone here, it's going to, my mouse disappeared, it's going to be hard to not think of it as a spot zone, right? And so there's a little bit of complication for planning staff if ultimately you guys let us know that maybe mixed use is not something that you want for that particular property because of its current scale and use. We would need to think about legally what kind of zone could we put here because everything around it is going to be at a lower density, the straight residential.
Councilmember Goodman, you look like you have a question.
Keith, could you do me a favor, or Trish, and be a little bit more explanatory about your map? It's not a very good map, and it doesn't show very well. You can barely read what it says. So if you could orient us.
Sure.
Maybe like where we are, maybe what some of the properties are right now, what's on those properties, not because we care to do anything different about those properties, but just to orient
Sure.
us and the public.
Apologize for the quality of the map. So this white swath that runs down the middle, so that's I-90. So there's I-90. This is Front Street right here. You can see the red is CBD. That's part of the Old Town. As we get into this area, so this is the Grange right here. And tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm just kind of making this up.
I think you said that's I-90, that's Gilman.
This is Gilman. Yeah, this is East Gilman right here.
I-90's on
Oh,
top.
I'm sorry. Thank you. This one is I-90. Sorry, that's East Gilman. So so this starts off with the Grange. This is Bohm's. This is Sam Kyle's property down here. On the north side, you have Triple X and I-90 Motorsports. And then the stuff that fronts onto, I don't know if that's Front Street or East Lake Sam at this point. So that's orientation. Here's Dairy Gold over here, and this is Lazy Boy right here. So is that helpful?
Yes, and then on the other side of that, I-90 doesn't actually run into Gilman, but on the other side, there are, those are also
So-
at,
Right, so over
topic.
here, the properties that are on East Lake Sammamish that stayed in Central, one is Carlson Kennels and the other is the boat dealership. And then once you get back behind these properties back here, this one's vacant right now, right, Trish? And then is one of these the detail shop?
I think so, and Minuteman and,
Yeah.
Is that
So,
it?
so we've talked to, so on the intensive commercial side, these property owners participated in the process. On the destination retail, the Grange, Bohm's, Sam Kyle participated in the conversations as we talked about what the potential outcome could be.
All right. Deputy Council President Batiste.
Thank you for the presentation, and just a couple of questions. When we're looking at option 1 and comparing that to option 3,
for which one?
on the intensive commercial
Okay.
parcels. So it looks like the two areas that would change between option 1 and option 3 are the FAR and the setbacks. And so my question was how, if at all, that would impact existing property owners.
The property owners had asked for, they were saying if they could have a perfect world, they would want the setbacks back, like they used to have, but they liked everything else about the existing zones, standards that they have, because they liked a little bit of a buffer from their neighbors, because they do put their parking in the front, and they do have some uses going on that they would like a little bit of separation. So you can see it's only a 5 for the side and the rear and 10 feet in the front. So it's not a lot of limitation for them from the setbacks, but it's just enough to give them that little bit of separation that they were hoping for.
Okay, so that was the one part of option 2, the older regulations that they liked.
So if you look at, so what you should, because we haven't had much development under the IC regulation, or the CIP regulations in IC, most of them actually built under column 2. So when you look at what they built under and what's being proposed, the real difference is they're getting a reduced rear yard setback. So that used to be 10, and now it's going to 5. And, they're getting more impervious. So for them, if you guys thought that column 3 was an okay outcome for intensive commercial, the property owners were happy with it because more impervious. As Trish mentioned, the one thing that is a big difference, so the front under Central was a build 2 line, right? So in other words, your building had to be right at the front property line because Central's all about pedestrians and being able to walk from property to property. Intensive commercial is much more geared towards parking out front. The buildings are set back. They've got like truck activity. And so those property owners didn't like the set 2 line. They actually like a setback because it gives them opportunities to push their building farther back on the property. So for them, so the big 2 things are getting that front setback back, and then also reducing the rear yard to 5 feet. Gives them some extra buildable area on the back of their property. So for them, they saw this as a win.
Keith, before you leave, I just wanted to ask that exact same question for the destination retail parcels.
So, and We have a number of them here tonight, so I assume they'll talk about this as well. So similarly, big deal is going from a zero build to line. So being able to, having to build their buildings up to Gilman, for example. Most of them didn't see that as potentially the future of their property. They liked having, so the 10-foot setback on the front is a minimum. They could put their building 20 feet back, 30 feet back. It could be back fairly far. Most of them saw their businesses as being, I don't want to say destination, but they actually are destinations. I mean, people know where the Grange is. People know where Bohm's is. Most of them drive to those locations. And having kind of that circulation and parking out front is advantageous to the current operations of those businesses. And so they saw having that, taking it from the build to line to the setback was advantageous for them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions right now? And I'm going to suggest that feedback that we heard might have been because we had 4 of the microphones on, so I'm going to try to turn mine off when I'm not talking. That's the extent of your presentation? Okay.
Right.
So before we discuss Councilmember Goodman.
Sorry. On the map, again, at the top it says proposed zoning changes, destination retail to retail and intensive commercial, central Issaquah to intensive commercial. Is this, right now, we're just having a discussion? Is there a,
Dang it, the
just the
title
prior
didn't.
discussions that were happening?
This
Okay.
title was supposed to be not there. It's corrected in the actual, when we say previously IC and previously destination retail, but the title didn't get changed, sorry. Good eyes.
When you say previously, right now,
For PPC's discussions and that.
okay, thanks.
Any other questions for right now? All right, so this is the point where I'm going to ask if anybody in the public wishes to speak. If they do, feel free to come up to the microphone. I'll give you 3 minutes. If you want to state your name and your relationship to the city, that would be great. Or not.
My name is Sam Kyle, address 371 Northeast Gilman Boulevard. I just want to comment, I guess, in conjunction with my support for the option 3. We've been through this and talked about it numerous different times with a lot of the retailers along Gilman Boulevard, Bohm's and the Grange, et cetera. Maybe one of the things you might want to think about, we never talked about it, but maybe I wouldn't do any good on my property, or I should say, my property is the corner property. I'm bordered between I-10, Gilman 3rd Avenue and the creek. So one of the other things, what we've talked about is 65-foot height limits, but maybe you want to think about extending that, like some of the other stuff down the street is 100 to 150, put in a sound buffer, because it's, my building, you get huge sound impacts from that freeway, and I know you will all the way down I-10, but just something to think about is increasing the height limits. While I'm saying this, it would not do me any good, maximization. One of the other things you got to keep in mind is there's shoreline restrictions along here. So when you're looking at 90% site coverage, you have to have that to offset a little bit of the mitigation impacts from the shoreline. So again, I think that the 10-foot buffer front yard setback we all kind of agreed to. I think that what they allowed to happen out here on some of the places where there's zero and straight up the walls is pretty ugly looking stuff around here. And so it gives a little bit more of a stair stepping and design to the buildings type of situation instead of a straight up type of designs. And that's about it. And if anybody has questions. I should also mention is that we're a big office user, and we provide for a lot of small businesses continuously for over here on the east side. And we hope to maybe maximize that with another building out there. But that's why I'm in support of the option 3 zoning type of thing, option 3 for our setbacks, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it. And I think when you said I-10, I think that was the old Highway 10 I-90, yeah? Yeah. I think. Although it was already I-90 when I got here. So does anyone else in the community wish to speak this evening to this issue? Going once? Going twice? Nope, okay. So we don't have a sort of classic preferred option here, but what do we, want to give me your thoughts on where we go from here? There isn't a preferred option, but there sort of is in terms of a suggested path procedurally going forward. Councilmember Ray, do you want to kick us? Oh, no, sorry. Why do I keep thinking it's services and safety? I said that earlier, and I don't know why I would think that. Councilmember Goodman, would you want to comment on, given that it would be coming to your committee?
On a date I won't be there.
Well, sometimes that's the best kind of routing of something, right?
Well, I don't have any, I mean, the process seems fine. It would go to council, would turn into an agenda bill, go to council, be referred to the committee, and then back to full council with a recommendation. I think the process is what we normally do. It would seem to me that we would start off with the option 3s, only because that seems to be why they were created.
All right. Other thoughts? Doesn't necessarily have to be complicated or difficult. So the conversation is sort of, again, refer out on the 15th to Land and Shore, coming back to full council, potentially November 19th, and leading off the conversation in committee with the option 3 on both the destination retail and the intensive commercial.
Well, I think it needs to come forward with a recommendation, and I'm sure it will. And the feeling I'm getting is that the recommendation would be options 3. No.
Sounds like that's what we're hearing from the community thus far. Councilmember Ramos?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, it sounds like, thank you to Ethan, Trish, and so forth. It sounds like you worked well with the community and property owners and took the time to work this through to get something that sounds like folks are agreeing on, which is making things look like we can work together very easily. So I like that when sounds like you've done your homework and worked with the community and the property owners. So thank you for that.
All right, so does anybody else want to comment? Otherwise, I think we've probably got some direction for the administration on this one. All right, Trish, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. With that, we will move on. We are now going to go to ID 0256, Citywide Strategic Plan. And this is going to be David Fujimoto, our Director of Sustainability, and Brian Scott from BDS Planning.
Great. Good night, or good evening, council members. Good night. Hopefully that'll be later. Thank you. We're here to talk about a next kind of important step in our strategic planning process. We're here to talk tonight about the vision, mission, and guiding principles, and also give you a preview and start some conversation about goals and objectives. Both Brian Scott and Gabriel Silverblatt, who you both know will be here, they'll be kind of tag teaming the effort. Gabriel's been a little bit closer to some of the recent work with the work groups, and staff have as well, so we can also provide some additional insight as we get into the presentation. And at the end, I'll have a little bit of time to talk about our process going forward following this meeting as well, so you have a good understanding of that. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Brian and Gabriel.
Brian, welcome back.
Good afternoon.
Haircut.
Thank you. Brian Scott with BDS Planning, my colleague Gabriel Silverblatt. Glad to be here for your work session tonight. And as David said, our goal is to get your approval, or at least your verbal consensus on the vision, mission, and guiding principles that we've already discussed at a couple previous meetings, and then get some broad input on goals and objectives. The agenda for tonight, we want to kind of give you a quick overview of the strategic plan components, tell you about where we are in the process, and then spend some time on the vision, mission, and guiding principles. This would be final review and approval. Quite a lot of process getting us to this place. And then we want to discuss strategic priority goal statements and objectives, and then talk about next steps. So as a quick reminder, a strategic plan is grounded in a vision, mission, and guiding principles, which then we identified the last time that we were here in this room together, we identified a number of strategic priorities. And then we've been working on identifying a goal statement to go with each of those strategic priorities, and then a series of objectives, actions, and ultimately we'll get to targets under each of those. So that'll be the format of the full plan. We've already gotten feedback from you and lots of other folks on the vision, mission, and guiding principles, and we hope that you'll be satisfied with the revised version we have for you tonight. You approved the strategic priorities, and we had a preliminary discussion about the goals. So today we want an approval on the revised language, and then a discussion about the goals and objectives. And again, a high-level discussion. We're not going to try to get the wording exactly right tonight for all those objectives. There's a whole bunch of them. We do want to get your feedback as specific as possible so we can help revise them and work through it. And there's been a lot of process since the last time we were here a couple of months ago, and Gabriel described that a little further, but he's been working very closely with the staff, and we were with a work session with the department heads a couple of weeks ago. Really a lot of ownership around a lot of parts of this, so we wanted to have Gabriel, who's been right in the middle of that, and the guy kind of with the markers and the keyboard moving it forward. So if you have questions, you can ask him directly about how we got to each of these statements.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm going to go ahead and take us forward here. So many of you are probably familiar with this diagram. We've been showing it through the process. Oh, thank you. We've been showing it through the process here, but we have a three-phase process in the strategic planning effort. Who we are in the first phase, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. We are right kind of towards the end of the second phase of this process, where we have a series of work groups on each of those strategic priority areas that you all approved. So staff from across the organization in different departments have gotten together to cross-pollinate and think through the goals, the goal language, and the objectives, supporting objectives for each of those strategic priority areas. We went back, we brought all that material up to the staff, the leadership group, strategic planning leadership group, which has council leadership on it in addition to all of the department directors from the city. So that leadership group kind of weighed the initial feedback from council on vision, mission, and guiding principles, and also discussed their first sort of impressions of that goal and objective language. So tonight we're here to look at the most current material, to consider it, and do what Brian said, which was to kind of take approval of that vision, mission, guiding principles, and then to get a first sense of your reactions to the goals and objectives. One thing I wanted to say, having observed the staff work groups in action, I came and facilitated a large group conversation with about 40 folks, all the staff work groups together, And we went through what a good goal statement is, what a good objective statement is, and we reflected on the community input from the strategic planning charrette in the first phase, as well as the broad community-wide survey. So there was a lot of robust conversation there. Then they went off and met and worked on their individual strategic priority areas individually, and I came back and facilitated a full group conversation where we looked at all of the staff sort of goals and objectives together as a collected whole. And I will say, having done this with several other city governments and working with staff, that we made some tweaks and adjustments to the language to try to tighten it up and make it kind of hang together. And the staff has been very pointedly defending every word that they went into those statements, and they have an incredible amount of buy-in and ownership over those words. So that was heartening to us at BDS, given that we know that the sort of success of the implementation of the plan has a lot to do with how much the staff is really bought into this process. So, that is not to say there's no reason to change any of the words on the page. It's just a word of caution about we want to continue to keep that that energy and excitement within the organization while we improve those statements. So, just wanted to take a moment to share some of that experience. So that brings us right into the.
So before you go on,
Yes.
I just want to mention a couple things you said. So vision, mission, goals, and objectives, right? Vision and mission, our objective this evening is to finalize those two.
That's right.
Right? And then our goal for this evening is to give further input on goals and objectives, but we're not attempting to finalize those this evening. I just want to make sure that everybody understands. And I appreciate what you said about staff buy-in. I think that that's awesome. I think that perhaps a slightly different way to think about this is that my observation of this is that the staff has been very mindful of what they've heard from the community. And so I want to make sure, we're going to have a role. It's up to us at the end of the day, the 7 of us, to make a decision on these things, right? And so the way I would say it is, I think it's really beholden on us to continue that mindfulness about what's come from the community. Mm-hmm. And I think as long as we do that, I think we're going to wind up having continued alignment with staff. Mm-hmm. So I'll also mention, we all have, I think, did you guys hand out the? So the 2 council members who aren't here this evening had comments, and I just want to mention that, this is, everybody, we get to talk about these things as the spirit moves us, so to speak, and I don't think we have to take it as, we don't have to, each of us doesn't have to go through every one of these comments from the folks who aren't here, but if you see something from the folks who aren't here and it moves you, then it's great if you want to discuss it. But it's really how this conversation occurs organically, and once again, trying as much as possible to tie it back from what we've heard in the community, both in charrettes and in follow-on conversations with the community. With that, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Martz. And I would just, some context about the piece of paper that's going around. As Councilor Martz suggested, we did have an opportunity to visit one-on-one with both Councilor Hunt and Councilor Winterstein, who were unable to be here tonight, about all the same material that we're about to discuss. And so on the page in front of you, you have sorted by vision, mission, guiding principles on one page, and then on the reverse side, on goals and objectives, they're either impressions or proposed language changes. And
I'm going to give you one more thing.
Yep.
And this is a mnemonic aid to help you. So it's Winterstein.
Winterstein.
And it's like, they used to grow hops here in the Issaquah Valley, right? What do you use hops for? Beer, right? What do you serve beer in? A stein. So it's Winterstein.
Winterstein.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I do that about once a year, so that people who keep track of what's going on in the city can do that. It's usually if Paul's not here, because I don't want to make him feel bad. But Winterstein.
Thank you very much. I would also just characterize in a broad way that our conversations with both counselors were that they were happy and satisfied with the process, understood the process, where we were at and where we were going, and felt happy with the evolution of these statements. Councilor Winterstein went as far as to say that he would not stand in the way of approval as written of the vision, mission, guiding principles, and that he had some helpful, specific feedbacks because he couldn't help himself. Those were his words. Moving us into the vision, mission, guiding principles conversation. This is a follow-on to Council Member Martz's comment that these statements have come from a intense community process through focus groups, an online survey, and a variety of sort of engagement opportunities throughout phase one, and that have been sort of the fodder for staff work groups and the leadership team as they have been wrestling with the words to make sure we're getting it right. At your last meeting, when we discussed a draft statement of a vision, it was presented as such. Issaquah is a unique and welcoming community, rich with history and a passion for the natural environment. And you, council members, and also from the work groups and the leadership team, we got feedback about this vision not feeling future-oriented enough. It felt a little too status quo to some. It also felt that protecting our natural setting should be key and more called out. People first was a comment that wanted to really stress that people were sort of first and foremost in the vision. A sense of expanding on socioeconomic diversity as being important here, acknowledging the change that Issaquah is currently experiencing and will continue to experience, and being forward-thinking. That's similar to that first comment. And so through considering that feedback and a lot of conversation, specifically most recently at the leadership team level, a revised statement of the vision that we came to was our vision for Issaquah, a thriving and welcoming community rich with history and a passion for the natural environment. So I think the key piece here is the word thriving, and the leadership team had a very robust conversation about that, and ultimately felt that thriving really encapsulated a lot of was able to capture a lot of that feedback that, felt like this was more about being proactive, forward thinking, and that it was about people first. So that's sort of where we ended up here with the vision, and I will cede the floor to discussion. We have obviously also on this page some feedback specifically from the other council members, but I'll let Council Member Martz decide how you want to deal with that.
Start with Councilmember Ray.
Thank you. Don't really love the idea of starting our vision by saying our vision for Issaquah. I think it would read tighter to say Issaquah is a thriving and welcoming community. It just flows better to me. That being said, I also like Councilmember Winterstein's changing of words, where he talks about honoring our rich history and lives its passion for natural environment. So if I could make some changes, it would be to make this into a single sentence and dump the vision part of it and weave in the passion for our natural environment and the honor that we show for our rich history.
So would that mean that it would be Issaquah is a thriving and welcoming community that honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment?
That would really resonate with me.
Well, how do other people feel about that? Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you. I first want to talk about how much I appreciate all the work that's been put into this and how much work city staff has done on this. I think that's great, and glad for the buy-in. One thing that you mentioned is that you wanted to keep the energy and excitement. And I think I would agree with the comments that Chris made about not starting off with our vision for Issaquah. But there's a couple things that are missing for me. One is similar to what Councilmember Hunt said in her comments about it. It seems to capture more about how we feel about our city now and currently, and how we appreciate our community, what we appreciate about our community. I'm not seeing anything about the future in this at all. And I also don't feel any excitement or energy from it. It's not that I don't agree with the words, and it's not that I don't agree with the sentiment. And then I guess the third comment I have is when you say Issaquah that's passive, and I would like it to be active. But I think the bigger thing for me is I want to be excited when I read it, and I want to think about kind of the future. And it's a vision. It's supposed to be. Vision means you're thinking ahead, and I'm not getting that out of this.
Other thoughts, comments? I will say I like active verbs. So the fact that we've got, I guess they're phrases, but honors and lives in that proposed language that Councilmember Ray borrowed from Councilmember Winterstein's comments. I like that there's some verbs in there, and the more that we can use verbs, the happier. I like it, and it kind of feels more active too when we make it about verbs. So I don't know. This is one of those things where we're not going with amendments and all that kind of stuff. We are providing feedback that hopefully the administration can use as guidance to put together final language. Councilmember Goodman?
I would say that if you're looking for thumbs up from the council tonight, that probably not going to rewrite and have all the council members agree with it, or a majority. But for future work, I would be looking for active language. When you get further down, actual, what do you call them? Not objectives, but the actual
Goals, objectives, actions?
Yeah, the actions. Looking for action-oriented, not, I want this to be a strategic plan that we're actually going to use. We're going to get some things done. And if we're not going to be forward-thinking in this, then I would like the rest of the document to be forward-thinking and very, very active. Because I can see that this is going to be what it's going to be, and I'm not happy with it, but I'm just one.
I want to ask Brian a question. Brian, can you share with us, in your experience, what's the role of a vision?
The role of the vision is to remind everybody where you're trying to get and sort of what the point is. And hopefully it's a statement that is short enough and concise enough that it's easy to remember and you don't get confused about it. So I'm all about active, and I think those things are all really good. No disagreement there. it's always perplexing in a public process to figure out how to be short, concise, and active and get in all those other ideas that everybody has that are important to people. And then you'll always end up in that kind of, and then you also get in this, you want it to be an active statement and you want it to be about the future, but every time you say is, people think you're talking about now instead of about the future, even if you mean our vision is that Issaquah will be. You don't really want to say will be. I mean, it's not an uncommon dilemma. Does that?
That makes me feel slightly better. The dilemma in which we find ourselves is not uncommon. Great.
Yeah, you could say Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community that honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment. I mean,
Say that again.
Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community that honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment.
What do people think about that? This is where, I mean, be careful how much wordsmithing we try to do tonight, but I think it's also true that, I mean, let's back up just a step. How important is it to us that there's sort of two competing visions, it seems to me, about, so to speak, about what this vision is, right? One is preserving those things that we think make the city special. And the other is shooting for what we want, sort of separate from preserving that. Because you can say like, oh, what I want for the future is to preserve the things that I like about the past, right? But fundamentally, do we see this as about preserving as we go forward? Or do we see this as something aspirational about where we get to in the future? I just want to sort of ask everybody, is it about preserving or is it about aspiring? Councilmember Ray.
I'm going to take first crack at it. I think two things. My experience in dealing with strategic planning is we spend an inordinate amount of time talking about vision and mission and getting all balled up on it, and we lose sight of why we're doing it, and the real magic happens further down the process, so I don't want to get all balled up in that. That being said, I think if you are to synthesize down this vision, it says we recognize that we're going to grow, and we want to do it in such a way that we create a community that's welcoming, that we don't lose sight of the things that make us special, and that's our history and our natural environment. So if I was to take that, the vision, that's what I'm taking away from that. We're going to grow, and that's cool, but we're going to do it in such a way that we're going to have a welcoming community, and we're going to maintain the things that make this place great.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure you answered my question.
I absolutely did not.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. Deputy Council President Batiste.
So I think to answer the question, for me, it's both. I really think that we are about preserving, but also looking to the future. And I know we've spent quite a lot of time focusing on the words, and I've heard all the feedback about the word thriving and really thinking about that can seem to be futuristic, but we have had a lot of talk about the future, and with Paul's, with what we talked about coming forward with Issaquah Thrives and that kind of thing, I'm totally fine with that language. I do still come away with a little bit of a feeling about us not having enough about a future-looking piece of this, and I actually like some of what Vicki talked about in terms of sustainable legacy for future generations. It gives you a very forward-looking feel. So to me, with the vision, I think for Issaquah, it seems like it would be both.
Councilmember Goodman.
Sure, I agree, it's both. I don't see where, unless somebody tells me that the thriving is intended to be about we're growing. So I think if somebody has to explain to me that that's what the word thriving means, I just don't see how it has anything forward. This captures, we are a thriving, welcoming community already, and everything up there is already true. So I'm just repeating myself, but I'm with new information and somebody else's explanation, what Chris, I don't see that in there. And I do like Vicky's comments.
Brian?
Gabriel's really been in the middle of this for a long time and given it a lot of thought. I'm going to push him to share a couple thoughts, if you don't mind.
Oh, I just always wanted to react to a couple of the comments here about whether thriving encapsulates the sort of growing nature or the change, and also the question about being future-oriented. I think the conversation that we had at the leadership team level, sort of, we talked through about that welcoming community actually was the phrase that was pointing to the growth, that we were welcoming that growth and that change. That welcoming wasn't just about sort of how you treat people on the street, but it was about, Issaquah was a welcoming place, meaning people that wanted to live here could live here. And then I think the thriving piece in terms of saying that we are thriving today is probably true for a lot of folks and may not be true for others. And that thriving has a lot to do with maybe someone's personal socioeconomic condition or their health, and that actually saying that Issaquah is going to thrive is could be construed as a fairly bold and aspirational statement if it's for everybody, which in an earlier iteration of this vision statement, it said everyone thrives. And we have walked back from that since. So maybe it's become a little less aspirational in the intervening moment.
So I want to ask City Administrator Moon, we're sort of at a fork in the road here. And one direction is we try to just dig in and get the language here this evening. And the other is we try to say that we're not sure that the language, that we've got consensus at the table, and we attempt to have you guys have another go at it. And I want to get your thoughts on this particular fork in the road.
Well, I
From
was
a
sitting here
staff.
just thinking about that myself, and I guess I have mixed thoughts, mixed opinion about that. I am uncertain that we could take the input, come back with the new iteration, and have a different conversation next time. I tend to agree with Councilmember Ray that one can get stuck at this level, and that it's ironic, I think, that the vision may ultimately not matter quite as much, or it's going to be better defined by the subsequent pieces. We have had this conversation with this group once before. We've had this conversation with multiple other groups, and at some point, there's still a lot of work to be done, and we need to keep making progress. So certainly, as we've expressed, the intent was to try to get some thumbs-up approval at this stage to this language or language that you want to suggest tonight, so that we could continue to feel like we've got the gist of what you want it to be, and that will help inform how we go and build out subsequent pieces. My opinion, it's important for us to keep trying to make progress, keep trying to work through these different levels. If we don't, we risk, and that's okay if you want to assume this risk, we risk developing a plan on the timeline that we have in mind. And a reminder on that is our hope was to get council approval, I think, at the end of the first quarter of 2019, such that then we can go into a planning kind of retreat with all of you and start to develop the 2020 budget with these goals, objectives, actions in mind.
All right. So I think here's what we should do. I think we should try to get to specific language. And what I'd like to suggest is that we start from one of two places. The first option is to start with the language that's up on the screen right now. And the second option would be to start with what I think of as a combination of Councilmember Ray and Councilmember Winterstein's suggestions, which is Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community that honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment. So I would like to ask what the pleasure of the body is as to which of those two to go with. So in one word or less, current or alternate as our starting point for the language of this vision. Councilmember Ray?
Are you channeling your inner optometrist there, which is better, A or B?
Okay.
I like B better. The proposed language of Issaquah is vibrant.
Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community that honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment.
It's brilliant.
Thrives as a welcoming community. All right. Next, who wants to?
Oh,
Councilmember Goodman,
okay.
so to speak. Councilmember Batiste?
I'm good with the new alternate.
So I'm good with the new alternate. I would also say that I think that there's actually even a way to go with the alternate and then even wrap in some of what Vicky said.
So we'll start with what our baseline is. Okay, so we've got consensus. We want to use as our starting point what you've got there. Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community that honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment. Councilmember Batiste, do you have an
So
idea for?
this doesn't flow. Really, it would still need to be worked with a little bit, but Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community, creating a sustainable legacy for future generations, honoring its rich history and living its passion for the natural environment. I think you can merge in that piece, which gives it more of a futuristic looking viewpoint, but it needs to be probably tweaked a little bit.
Okay. Oh, no, you chose a different color. See it? I'm going to let Brian. Brian, can you read us the revised?
Issaquah
Oh, sorry, you need to be at the microphone, having asked you to read it.
as a welcoming community, creating a sustainable future, or a sustainable legacy for future generations that honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment.
All right. Thoughts? I saw a thumbs up from Councilmember Ramos. It certainly doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. A bumper sticker? That's the right term, right? But I don't see any violent disagreement. Councilmember Ray? Councilmember Goodman? Okay. Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community. What's that first? Creating a sustainable legacy for future generations.
That's it. For future generations, that honors.
Honors, that honors refers to the legacy. So it's the legacy honors its rich history and lives its passion for the natural environment. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm giving everyone some time to percolate this a little bit.
Two its in that one sentence.
Its rich history and lives its, it honors its rich history and lives its passion. It's being Issaquah in both cases.
You change the first "it's" to the.
Or you could leave the first "its" and make the second "its" an A. Lives a passion for the natural environment.
Or you can say that honors its rich history, it honors its rich history and passion for the natural environment.
Well, there we go. It's
Leave
rich.
and lives its.
You can
But
read
it's
the
just-
lives.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Gilman, can you say that again?
Well, if you say that future generations will honor the rich history and passion for the natural environment, the lives part of it, I understand that it's active, like we like to be active around here, but it's almost imposing something that we want people to do, to go outside and hike, which is the byproduct of having such a wonderful natural environment around here. But you could shorten it by just saying honors its rich history and passion for the natural environment. I don't know, it's thought.
Deputy Council President Batiste.
I agree with that.
All right.
So,
Ryan is back there writing. We will sell no wine before it's time. Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community, creating a sustainable legacy for future generations that honors its rich history and passion for the natural environment. Councilmember Goodman?
I think honors should be singular, because generations is plural. Future generations that honor.
The legacy honors. It's modifying legacy.
Modifying generation, future generations.
For future generations is a
Let's see.
clause.
Issaquah
It's a legacy
thrives as a
that
welcoming
honors.
community.
You could put for future generations in parentheses, right, if you were trying to be more explicit.
I see what you're saying.
All right, are we good with this? We have 5 people that are good with this, so we will take this and we will move on. Thank you all very much. This is the old comment about sausage making, I think applies. This is hard work for people in the audience and at home, but I think it's important that the 5 of us were in general agreement on this.
thank you. I'm going to move us to the mission statement here. We had a proposed mission statement of the City of Issaquah provides effective stewardship and public services to ensure a livable, safe, vibrant, and inclusive community. A reminder that the mission statement is about what the city government, the municipal corporation, does to advance us towards that vision. And your feedback, as well as from the work groups and leadership team, was actually that this looked pretty good. That vibrant and inclusive is more sort of an aspirational statement than the rest. A question about whether this suggests that we don't give good services or stewardship now, and then finally, and importantly, that don't we feel that we aspire to be more proactive than just providing? And so a lot of conversation, especially at the leadership team recently about this, resulted in a rephrase that is more active and about the future and sort of being more proactive. And that revised mission statement is, we shape a safe, vibrant, livable, and inclusive community through effective stewardship and quality public services.
So nobody's jumping to put their hand up. I have to say, I agree with Councilmember Hunt. I don't love shape as a verb. I would probably, I actually think provides is perfectly fine. One of One of the things that we have to be careful about is that it's something that we don't, in this city, often hear from the public, which is a public, in some quarters, even of King County, the dominant feeling towards municipal government is to stay out of the way. And so I think that for folks who have a minimalist view, I think provides is a more comforting word than shapes. Shape sounds an awful lot like a pretty, so there's a Brave New World element to shapes that small c conservative in me kind of goes, oh, that's interesting. Thoughts? If we went with provides rather than shape? You provide a safe, vibrant, livable, and inclusive community through effective stewardship and quality public services? No? Councilmember, Councilmember Goodman?
Yeah, I don't think provides is the right word. So I'm thinking.
Okay. Councilmember Ray?
I don't think that provides is the right word either, because we're not actually providing it, and I don't like the word shape either, and I'm sort of with Councilmember Goodman. It's, we provide a framework, a structure, a place. There's another word that really captures our mission, which is to lay a foundation where the community can be safe and vibrant and livable and inclusive. But it's not, our job is not to provide it, it's to facilitate it. I'm still wordsmithing on you.
Okay, we're in search of a verb. While we're thinking about verbs, Councilmember Ramos? No?
No.
Deputy Council President Batiste?
Well, we had a lot of conversation about the word shape, but now with looking at it with fresh eyes, and now I'm really landing with that I'm not crazy about the word shape either. I don't have an alternate right now.
Well, we help create, we
Support.
Foster.
foster, that's getting closer.
We think of foster. Not to try to oversell it, but I like foster. Also a good kind of beer. Any,
Advance, champion, encourage, cultivate, nurture, further, harbor, serve, uphold. It's not necessarily right. I'm just trying to
sure,
stimulate some
talk
thought.
through it.
I'm still thinking, but I like the word foster as well.
I like foster.
Stacey, you okay with foster? All right, foster it is. We foster a safe, vibrant, livable, and inclusive community through effective stewardship and quality public service.
I think we should take off we. But, so, and
To shape, or to foster?
fostering a safe,
Fostering.
fostering a safe.
Fostering? Fostering? Everybody seems to be nodding their heads generally. No? Councilmember Ramos?
No, starting with fostering, then right, just foster, I say, out the way. Fostering, what are you?
Foster makes it a verb. Fostering makes it a gerund?
Yeah, it makes
Something
it
like that.
awkward. Yeah.
Foster?
So perhaps the consultants could explain to us the role of the mission, and then that might help us decide which form of foster we.
A great suggestion.
The mission is a statement of organizational purpose that will get us, that will push us towards that, achieving the vision state, the aspirational state that is articulated by the vision.
And most vision statements start with the word "to," but I don't think there's any reason you have to. on your active thinking, getting rid of that, to foster would be a common way to start a vision statement, or a mission statement, but using "we" or just taking it out and turning it into something might be more active.
Councilmember Ray?
I actually like the word "we." I like the ownership of "we." I like to say "we foster." That's what we do. It's our mission. We own it. Let's own it.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not something I'm going to go to the mat for. I don't agree with the "we," but that's because of my past job where it was drilled in me that it's unprofessional, but it's not this kind of work. So I'd be fine with "to foster," I'd be fine with "fostering," I'd be fine with "we foster."
I'm with you. I'm fine with anything that involves the core of the word foster, and either "to" or "we" or nothing. Deputy Council President Batiste.
I think when I think of vision, the "we" is not exactly working for me. I think starting out with fostering is probably what I've liked. That's what I've heard that I've liked the best. Or some version of foster, starting with that word.
Okay, starting with foster.
Yes.
So no word in front of it. Councilmember Ramos?
Good, just want to start with an adjective. I'm good. Foster, any way you want, with an ing.
All right, so Chris, would you be okay with foster a safe, vibrant, livable, and inclusive community?
Sure.
Okay. Everybody else? Foster A? Brian, you look like you ready to say something?
No, I thought you were done, and I was just trying to. Sure.
All right, are we okay with foster a safe, vibrant, livable, and inclusive community through effective stewardship and quality public services? Yes, we are. Do I see a frown, Deputy Council President?
Oh, no,
Batiste?
no.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, very good, thank you. So the last piece of the set of purpose statements, as we call them, purpose statements are vision, mission, guiding principles. Last set of those are those guiding principles. And to remind everyone, and this was an important piece that came out of the leadership team meeting, these guiding principles are central tenets of the city. They're guideposts. They're things we aspire to. They're not necessarily achievable in a 5-year time frame with a budget and a work plan associated with them. They are aspirational sort of North Stars about what we're trying, the principles that we sort of organize our work. And those, at your last meeting, we discussed people, environment, community prosperity, service excellence, and equity, with a variety of words to describe those headlines. And these were sort of a simplification and distillation of some existing principles that the city has today. And we got some feedback. Interestingly, we nixed a bunch of the "we's" from those statements and some other comments. But through leadership team discussion and through trying to incorporate that, we came up with sort of just these simplified statements about people, environment, community prosperity, service excellence, and equity. And I don't think I need to read through them one at a time, but I guess the question is whether these feel like they hang together, whether they feel like a complete set.
Thoughts? Councilmember Ray.
I like to lean in. I think that under community prosperity, I think these are really good. But under community prosperity, I'd like an adjective before civic culture. like it's an engaged civic culture or something, but just to have a civic culture doesn't seem to, I needed something to define civic culture.
A qualifier.
Yeah, and I like engaged.
All right. Other thoughts? Anybody have any heartburn over and engaged? So it would be sustain a vital place to live and work with a stable and robust economy, an engaged civic culture, and an integrated transportation system, I think is probably, so to match phrases, an integrated transportation system.
Yes, Councilmember Goodman just whispered in my ear, and I think she's right. It might be an engaging civic culture, not an engaged civic culture.
Engaging.
Engaging.
I can live with engaging.
I think it actually is superior.
All right, I don't see any heartburn. I don't see anybody clutching their pearls over this. There had been a suggestion around alternate language, but I actually like stable and robust economy. And the stable part is important, I think, as we talk about funding mechanisms for the things that we want to do as a city. So I like keeping that in there. Oh, now Councilmember Goodman has no thoughts? No? Okay. So with that change, sustain a vital place to live and work with a stable and robust economy and...
Oh, I hate to do this.
What's that?
I hate to do this. I don't really like the word vital place. I like vibrant, if we want to stay with V's. Sustain a vibrant place to live and work in a stable, robust economy, an engaging civic culture, and an integrated transportation system.
Vibrant place to live and work. Okay? I'm trying to, vibrant. Okay? Live vibrantly. I'm just, Italy. Okay.
What was the purpose of the word vital?
Right, because otherwise you're sustaining a place to live and work.
No, but that specific word,
Right.
what is it? What is
In
it?
this context,
What is it about the word vital? I mean, what does it mean to have a vital place to live and work?
It's prosperous.
I think it has a lot of the same connotations of vibrant, or at least in my mind it does.
There's an echo of the mission if we bring vibrant through. Since we are fostering a safe and vibrant, livable, inclusive community. So if we apply it back, it gives us some interconnection between the mission and the principles.
all right.
So one
Councilmember
definition of, the first definition of vital is absolutely necessary or important or essential. And the second one is full of energy, lively, synonyms, vibrant.
Yeah, I guess that was the piece that I was thinking of.
So sustain a vibrant place to live and work with a stable and robust economy and, was it engaging? Engaging civic culture and an integrated transportation system. Everybody good with that? Yep. Looks like everybody, Councilmember Goodman? Still thinking? Oh, no problem. Which one? Sorry, which was the no? You're fine. I think we're good.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. So that moves us out of the purpose statement portion of the evening, and
Actually, I
yes.
want to, for City Administrator Moon, so this is still going to come back as a bill at some point, right? So this is, we have not adopted these this evening. We have set forth the intended language.
Yes.
And so I want to say that if the community has further thoughts on this, if somehow we've missed what the community thinks, then we want to hear from the community. Of course, we want to continue to hear from the community. But if everybody's sitting at home going, "What? Engaging? What?" we look forward to hearing from the community both this evening and at further council meetings before we adopt this formally.
Sure, that it will be continued forward in a package as that package evolves, and ultimately, yes, council will adopt the strategic plan. At this point, you're kind of endorsing this piece enough so that we can move on and start to land in a more formal way on the other pieces.
Right. Okay. I'm glad we were able to clarify that. All right. Now for the parts that tonight we are not attempting to get to final language on, but rather just trying to provide continued feedback.
Exactly right. So unlike the other pieces, you have not formally as a group all had an opportunity to discuss these goals and objectives, although you did see earlier versions of draft goals, I will say. You have not seen all of the goals and objectives kind of collected together and discuss those as a group. So the purpose right now is to allow you all to do that, as well as to so provide us with some high-level first reactions to that material. As Brian indicated earlier, we have, as part of our process, scheduling individual one-on-one interview discussion with each of you before your the next time when we'll be looking to approve this language. So there'll be a good opportunity for you to offer more granular, specific edits to the language at that time.
And can I have you or Brian talk a little bit about the purpose of goals and the purpose of objectives?
Sure. And this will come up a little bit in the slides as I go. So let me keep that in front of mind, and hopefully I'll get there in just a second. So I wanted to remind us that we did approve the strategic priority areas. Those were the mobility, growth and development, environmental stewardship, social and economic vitality, core infrastructure, and city leadership and services. And goal and objective statements that we're looking at are, their intent is to articulate outcomes that you all want to see for Issaquah. They're outcome statements, and they should be phrased as such, because there are, as we go through the process, we will further develop actions that are going to help us to get towards those outcomes. So the more specific we can be, the better about our outcomes. Goals are very intentionally not very specific. They're broad within those strategic priority areas. And what makes a good goal statement, which up on the slide here, these were the instructions we gave to staff in those work groups that helped to develop them. First and foremost, they're responsive to community input that came through this process. They should be concise. They are prioritized. They are a prioritized future condition or achievement. That's what I was saying about them being an outcome. They are an intermediate step towards achieving that vision and mission. Basically, they're sort of the building blocks of the vision. We need these goal outcomes to be true in order to get us to that vision statement. This is really important. They're not too specific about the how, and that allows flexibility and changes in approach as time goes on and conditions change. So goal statements can stay firm and can be enduring in a way that action statements are much more changeable and might be updated on a regular basis. So that's what makes a good goal statement. The draft goals that we're here to discuss tonight are a new iteration of draft language that you have already looked at, but they're here collected on the screen, sort of you can see how they hang together. And
so let me just inject one thing here, just to be very, very clear. So this is, when we have historically done council, city goal setting, right? This is where the term goals here are not synonymous, right? This definition of goal is, I think you use the term enduring, or, what we have historically talked about as goals, demonstrable chunks of work that we can wrap our arms around, that we're going to get to when we talk about objectives, right? And so in this parlance, objectives are what we have historically talked about as goals and goal setting. And City Administrator Moon, correct me if I'm wrong on that. All right, keep going.
Thank you. So I was just getting to the, I was just done with the, I think we should, we have an opportunity to walk through each of these specific goals with the supporting objectives that come after that. And so we can either consider them as a group, all the goals together, or you can, we can talk about them in the context of the goal with the supporting objectives underneath. And it just depends on how you all want to do that.
And I would like to suggest that we do a goal and its objectives together. And so, because I think that I would rather have 6 conversations than 12. I think that that we can do it that way, unless anybody, and I'm not seeing any objections. So let's proceed that way.
Okay. So just a quick thing on objectives then, since we're going to talk about them together. Objectives specify the outcomes we're seeking to create and for whom. All of these things are, in an ideal world, we could check every single one of these boxes. Rarely, if ever, have we experienced that a organization or a city or has been able to achieve all of these things with respect to all of their goals and all of their objectives. But this is just the sort of directions we gave to staff. So they link in a compelling way to the goals that they're related to, as well as the mission and the vision. The objectives are specific enough. This is what Councilmember Martz was just saying, that they're specific enough to afford sufficient control over the outcomes and enable some real accountability with respect to sort of when those objectives are being implemented, or the work that's being done on them, that they're realistic and achievable given the capabilities that you have in a limited time frame. The direction that was given to the staff was think about objectives over a 5-year time horizon, what feels realistic and achievable within that 5-year time horizon. So that helps to give a sense of what we're talking about. That good objectives are, we can find a way to make those measurable on an accurate and timely basis. And finally, that good objectives allow us to make, as a collection of human beings that are trying to do good for Issaquah, allow us to make some strategic trade-offs later down the line related to our focus and how we allocate resources. So as Councilmember Martz has suggested, we're going to go through with a goal and objectives together. So the first one here is mobility. The goal is proposed as getting around town is easier for people who live, work, and play here. That's the outcome that is being aspired to with the following objectives. I don't think I need to read each one of those individually. They're fairly clear and on the screen, so I think we should just go ahead and have a conversation about them as a group.
Yeah, I don't think you have to read through them all. Councilmember Ramos.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. The objectives to me, when you talk about connected mobility system, multimodal mobility system, connections and the light rail, but it says we're doing that. And most of that is really coming from Metro Sound Transit, a lot of the big public transit piece of that. We aren't doing, we're coordinating obviously and trying to get more, but we're fighting really hard and not getting much, particularly in the public transit arena currently. So I'm just trying to figure out how, I'm sitting there, looking, a few years down the line and saying, how did I really create a sustainable funding strategy so I get, good bus service around Issaquah to connect that mobility system, other things that I can do to do that. So that kind of crossover, I want to feel that we can get there, and often we can't because someone else is really controlling the money and the service.
So I'm going to ask City Administrator Moon to talk about this a little bit, because this is something that came up in the leadership team that talked about these, and I think it may have been on this particular one in specific. Do you want to talk to this a little bit?
Yeah, maybe a couple points to make. I think early on we had a conversation, certainly at the community charrette, about different levels of involvement, own, influence, monitor. And so I would keep that in mind as you're looking at it. Some of these are clearly things that we can own, independent of others. Others our biggest aim might be to influence because we don't control everything. And I hope, I'm not sure that we have any on here that are about monitoring, but we've tried to be mindful of what power and influence we have. And even in places where we could perhaps at best influence, where we have felt it was important for us to do so, we've tried to create an objective. And a good example of that is objective number 4 under mobility, which is about light rail. We do believe that we have the ability to influence those decisions, and that if we're proactive, we can shape the outcome. So we don't want to sit back and just have things happen to us. There is a lot of crossover with all of these, and in a way that's kind of cool, because they should help each other to get at that ultimate goal. So I'm not too concerned about not being able to own every single piece, but I do think that's a helpful construct to think about as you're looking at it. And Council President Martson, hopefully that helped a little bit, but if there's a more direct question.
No, that does. And the way I also look at this is these objectives, hopefully, somebody's going to get assigned to these objectives, right? And can you, at the end of 5 years on an objective, say, were you able to do this, right? And so can somebody come up with a coherent definition? So like I look at sustainable funding strategy is in place, right? That doesn't mean we have $300 million in the bank, right? It means that we know how, we have a plan on how we're going to do the mobility-related improvements in the city, and we know how we're going to do it in such a way that we maintain minimums, and that the city has developed that plan. And understanding that that plan may involve elements that we can't control, but that we have a plan that makes sense. And I think that's one that can occur a lot sooner than 5 years out, myself personally. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, sort of, it takes that, but and I understand the influence versus control, definitely, and there's different things, but some of these are pretty, say like a sustainable funding strategy is in place. That's very concrete, and that's very much on us. Adaptive plan, is in place basically. And, these are things that are really, to me, saying are done, and I guess I'm just fighting with Metro now, trying to get us stuff, and they're just saying us now all the plans they have are now unfunded. So all this expansion and future stuff that's going to be good is continuing to be pushed further and further down the line. So I'm just, I'm kind of shy on that arena, because that's a big piece of that mobility is the public transit side. We can do some great things on our roads. We can do some stuff for bicycle lanes. We can do parts of that, but if we don't have, wheels moving us around, other than our own legs, and single occupant vehicles, we're going to be pretty limited. That's just a fact. So that's kind of, just want to bring that up.
All right, thanks. Councilmember Ray.
So a couple thoughts. First, on the goal, I bind up on the word easier because it's comparative. So I want to know easier than what. So easier than today, easier than 10 years ago, easier than tomorrow. So since I'm just providing feedback here, and we need some clarity on easier. I agree with the Councilmember Ramos on some of the objectives, and as I was listening to that discussion, I leaped forward and read ahead in the book, and what is going to be really interesting is the actions and targets. And so I think as we get into the actions and targets section, I will surmise that we will find that we are recrafting the objectives so that they are more actionable. Because some of them we got nothing we can do here, so that's probably not a good objective. And I think that's okay. And then my second thought is I believe the objectives are where the magic happens. They are the glue that connect your aspirations, your goals, your vision, your mission, all that stuff we talked about to real stuff. I mean, they're the linkage layer, so that getting them right is super important. And then finally, I suspect we will adopt a set of objectives, and we will come back and we will review this plan a year from now or 6 months from now, or whatever that review cycle is, and we'll say, we need to update this when we update that. So I don't think we don't have to nail everything right now, but we do need to start getting at least one stake in the tent nailed down so we can start moving forward.
Councilmember Goodman? Oh, no. Deputy Council President Batiste.
Thank you. So just to follow up a bit on Councilmember Ramos and just being able to make sure that these are things that we can achieve. The one thing that stuck out to me is number 3, we say that we have efficiencies for all modes. And, but right above, we talk about adopting a plan. So maybe having those linked together, maybe it would be the targeted modes in the plan. I don't know the exact wording for it, but starting to go down that road of we would have a plan, and then those would be the steps underneath it.
I would like to speak to that point because I think the staff was grappling very much with the distinction between 2 and 3 and whether 3 was a subset of 2 and feeling like maybe they weren't on the same level of detail. And ultimately we came around to the idea that there are some objectives that are more long-term facing, like that adopted plan for intuitive, integrative, innovative, multimodal mobility system, where that plan will encapsulate some really long-term visioning, long-term planning. And number 3 was really about kind of continuing to do the work that improving the mobility system today and doing that work in the very immediate term. And so the staff work group that was on mobility felt that it was really important to kind of say, we recognize we're going to be doing these things at the same time. I think that was where they ended up, even though there was a similar kind of concern about whether these were kind of one was nested under the other or something like that.
Just wanted to confirm, you're looking for feedback from us tonight, not final language?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely not final language. And I think the council member Ray's question of posing his feedback in terms of a question, easier than what, is exactly the kind of thing that's helpful for the staff and for the rest of us to kind of grapple with.
So here's what I like about easier. It's not easy, right? Getting around town is easy for people who live, work, and play here. That would not be good, right? Easier. Here's what I like about easier is it implies that we're going to measure how easy it is for people to get around town, and that we're going to have targets for it. And so that's what I do like about that one, because I have been wanting us to have a lot more metrics since before I was on council in 2009. So other thoughts, comments, questions about this one? Or are we ready to move on?
I just want to make sure that we at least recognize the feedback we got on this one from Councilmember Hunt. And you guys have that. I mean, she had some good thoughts, and I think we've kind of captured it. Deputy President Batiste was talking about 2 and 3. And Councilmember Ramos talked about 4, so I guess we did.
Thank you. All right, let's move on.
Move forward, okay. So second strategic priority, growth and development. Goal is growth is proactively managed, planned, and communicated in a responsible and deliberate way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. The 3 supporting objectives stated below.
So I'll start off here. I've talked to Councilmember Hunt about this charm issue. And I'll just plus, I mean, again, we're not deciding today, but I'm going to +1 her language about neighborhoods have retained their distinctive charm and character in both the built and natural environments. And that's specifically grounded on comments that came up from the public. Other thoughts? Councilmember Ray.
This is mostly a style violation, but that goal is not concise. It's rather verbose.
I agree with you.
So just from a directional statement, if there's a way that we could wring out a few words here and there and not lose the intent, that would probably make it more effective.
So one vote for making it more concise, and I heard you say, Councilmember Martz, that we wanted to potentially, or a validation of the word charming.
Well, I'm saying I specifically like listed in this in the comments from council members who aren't here. There's a specific proposal to reword objective number 1 as neighborhoods have retained their distinctive charm and character in both the built and natural environment.
So you're
I'm saying I'm
validating
+1ing
that. Got it. Thank you.
Specific language.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ray.
Sorry. And then on objective 3, I just don't know what access to daily services are. So everybody else might, but I could use some clarity on kind of what we're driving at there.
So just a question about what do we mean by daily services? So we should make sure we're clear on that.
Councilmember Ramos, and then Councilmember Goodman.
Yeah, I'm looking at objective 2, and I'm not sure what to do with it, but I know Councilmember Hunt has a comment on that one as well that needs to be looked at, and it just strikes me as pretty unique. Her comments are pretty good, have a role. I mean, it sounds like community understands what's happening, and it just, I don't know, it doesn't sound like we're engaging the community, for sure. Sounds like we're just telling them. And that whole part of development kind of just feels a little awkward there. So 2, I'm having a problem with this, and I agree with the same comments that Councilmember Hunt has on number 2 there.
Councilmember Goodman.
It appears that number 2 flows from the phrase in the goal that says communicated in a responsible and deliberate way, and communicated. Can't tell if it's supposed to be communicated in a responsible and deliberate way, or if growth is, all those things are done responsibly and deliberately. But anyway, I think that needs work. I'm not sure what to do with the goal in number 2, but I think that those 2 together need work. And I agree with Bill that Vicky's comments are a place to start.
Deputy Council President Batiste.
I wanted to say I agree with what Councilmember Goodman just spoke about, just more than just understands current development and the plans that guide future growth. It
Okay.
without engagement and and I would just +1 some of the things that Vicki had talked about.
Yeah, so feeling that it's important that it's more than understands, and I will observe completely neutrally that the leadership team had a robust conversation about whether demanding an outcome of understanding was too ambitious.
So I'll point out that I think we may have 2 separate things here that are both important, right? One is engagement with the community as we are developing policy. And the other is communication, what's going on in the city, how things are going, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that they are in some ways 2 different activities, right? And I suspect that this one was as written was more about the second, right? And getting better at our outward communications with the community. But I think it's also true that there are these 2 parts, and we want both of them to work well. And so, but that to me is once you've got policy, what's going on? I know occasionally folks from Tallis will come to us and say they're not sure they necessarily feel that they know what's going on all the time. And that's an example of an area where I think the intention of a goal like this was to address those sorts of concerns that aren't really necessarily how did you develop policy, but just, what's happening in our communities. So.
And from the process, during the charrette, there was a lot of community input about a lot of things related to growth and development. And I think the staff, in trying to consider a lot of that input, realized that a lot of the input was evidence sort of that things were happening at the city and things were happening in the community that the folks were expressing concern about. And there was a disconnect there about an absence of information that everybody understood. And so this was about trying to make sure that people kind of understood what was going on. So when they gave the city input, it was in the context of what was really happening. I think that was the point they were trying to get to. At the same time, embracing the community was important.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. Other comments on this one, or are we ready to move on? I'm not seeing any further thoughts, so let's move on.
Okay, so environmental stewardship is the third strategic priority here. The goal language is environmental resources are proactively enhanced, protected, and stewarded. The 4 objectives supporting below. I believe Councilor Winterstein had a full proposed rewrite of this language, which we don't need to, we're certainly not trying to get to agreement on final language, but just general feedback on this goal and objectives together.
Councilmember Ramos.
Yeah, I like, to me, this is getting to something I'm liking in the fact that we're talking about environmental resources, natural resources. To me, that includes all those bits of our environment. And we're talking about actually doing something, proactively enhancing, protecting, stewarding. So we can actually talk about doing some management of our lands, that we have actually a lot of open space that if we're really looking to the long term, 100 years down the road, just letting them sit is not necessarily the plan. So I think this gives us a good goal of trying to look at those as real land managers, not just city, but we have a lot of acres of land that, looking at long term, there's things sometimes you need to do to protect and enhance them. And I like the way this wording brings that together. And to me, natural resources is everything on that land, from whatever it is to trees, to streams, to, whatever it is that. So I like that.
All right. Councilmember Goodman?
I think number 3 suffers from the last one we were talking about. Not sure how we measure that. I don't like the word educated. It implies they're not. I'm not exactly sure what this means, but I think that needs work.
I'm with you, and I'm +1 that it's hard to say how would you measure this one, right? How would you give this to somebody as a goal and say, person X, show me that you've achieved this 5 years from now? Councilmember Ray.
So 2 thoughts. One is in reading Councilmember Winterstein's alternative language for goals, I really like it. I think it's cleaner and tighter. As for number 3, I'm of a different mind, because I read this as this is our ability to help the community to play a larger role in being stewards of Issaquah's environment. Yeah, and I think that's measurable, and I think part of it is engaging them and part of them is educating. I actually like this one. I would change the word to say inform, so that they can be responsible stewards of Issaquah's environment instead of to be. But I actually like this one. I think it's measurable, and I think it's doable. I think it's essential.
Deputy Council President Batiste.
So I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Ray just said, but I think in terms of the the actual verbiage that came from Councilmember Winterstein, the everlasting legacy piece, I feel like we just wrapped into the vision statement. So really have it captured there. So I just wanted to point that out.
Was that a vote for not needing to say legacy again, or was it saying that the resonance with the vision is a good?
Yeah, I think that we can do some work on it, but I wasn't seeing that we needed to wrap that in again.
Got it.
Other thoughts on this one? Are we good? I mean, there's good luck parsing this one. I think that this is, I'm glad this is one that we're not trying to get the final language on today, because I think it would be it would be a heavy lift, so. Oh, Councilmember Ramos.
And I guess I'd like just throw in there, to me, environmental stewardship includes a whole lot of things other than natural resources. It includes working with our recycling program. It includes all these other things that we do to reduce the carbon footprint with the city is making with our sustainability plan. Those kinds of things. They're not necessarily when you put everlasting legacy that's like more to the land we have. To me, this includes all those actions we're taking, sometimes on a global scale, if you will, of our part towards those things. And I think those fit under, should be able to fit under here as well as, like our own land base and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool.
Thank you. Anything else, or shall we move on? Looks like we're ready to move on.
Okay. So social and economic vitality goal statement is an economically vital and diverse community is supported by robust businesses, affordable housing, and supportive services for supporting objectives.
So I will lean into this one and say, I think that 3 of the 4 objectives are challenging. I think that there's an increase in the diverse mix of businesses that support a local living wage. I think that's great and measurable and the kind of thing we want to have as an objective. I find the other 3 all to be squishy. Housing opportunities are available across the income spectrum for individuals and families to live and work in the community. I think that is, I don't think it's phrased in a way that you can develop, you can say that somebody's going to solve that in 4 or 5 years. Issaquah's changing and diverse culture is celebrated and reflected in programs and services in the community. That's one I think you could say we're doing that right now. Somebody could just do nothing for the next 5 years and come back and say, yep, accomplished. And then a range of accessible services and resources are reducing inequalities in health and well-being. I'm not sure I get how one would, I suppose it's challenging somebody to measure inequalities in health and well-being and then do something about it. But all 3 of those, to me, I have concerns that they're too broad and lack specificity. Deputy Council President Batiste.
So I would agree in +1, those statements. I almost feel like the last 2 might be able to be merged together. I think they're both important, but I think that you might be able to merge them together. And I also feel like we're a little bit light on the economic vitality. We just have one point in regard to that, and so thinking that could be expanded.
Other thoughts? Oh, all right. I think we're ready.
I'll just, I guess, ask a clarifying question. Councilmember Martz, you suggested that there's we're lacking enough specificity under 2, 3, and 4. And I guess the question, we're going to
see more like goals than objectives.
Right. So your direction to staff is to try to bring those to be more concrete or specific about what it is we're actually trying to see change in the community.
So like number 2, you could say, we should have a housing plan that, that is designed to achieve specific targets in low-income and workforce housing, example, right? Number 3 would be, we identify the diverse elements of, we have a diversity plan in place that identifies the elements in our community that are, and make sure that we have services. I think of, we have a growing South Asian community in this city, and I don't think we do almost, careful how I say this, but I don't think we've identified a lot how to serve the unique elements of the South Asian community in our city. And then on the 4th one, I think it's, you have a plan where you identify the inequalities in healthcare and well-being for the city's residents, and have, again, coming back to, have a plan for how to address those inequalities that you've identified.
Okay.
Councilmember Ray?
No, I just was spending some time as you were going through that, reading this, and I really agree with Deputy President Batiste. There's, part of our goal up there is economically vital and supported by robust business, and we don't really have much at all, if anything, that really speaks to how are we going to achieve that part of the goal around robust business in the community. So I think there's a big void there.
Okay, so we definitely heard that, and also we should remember and keep in mind that there's going to be action supporting each of these objectives, and some objectives may have more actions than others.
Deputy Council President Batiste?
And just a suggestion, just because it popped into my mind, but if you were to, like if we need to stay within 4, and you were to open a space for something else regarding economic vitality, which I think would be really important, what you could do with 3 and 4 is you could mix in, starting with 4, when you talk about a range of accessible services, you could talk about a range of accessible and diverse services, and then you could also, one of the things that would help make that more measurable are things that have been established in the community needs assessments, since we now have that, and it's new information, and it would make it a little bit more, give us a bit more of a
Baseline.
metrics
Right.
to it.
So using the community needs assessment as a baseline for
Just
some of
an
this.
idea.
Okay.
So I want to riff off that just for a second and suggest that it's not necessarily merging 3 and 4, it's merging 2 and 4. Because 2 and 4 both have to do with inequality. One is specific around housing, and the other is more general inequalities. Number 3 is around diversity in the community. And I think they're very different things, right? I think that we have recognized for a while about inequality, and we have a Human Services Commission, but I think we're only just beginning to address the growing cultural diversity that we have in the community, and the fact that we're up to whatever it is, 26 or 27% is not people of European extraction. And so I suggest that there might be fertile ground to merge 2 and 4.
I would agree with everything that you just said. Now that I'm looking at that again, those are separate sections, and I'm not positive. I almost would like to spell out the housing opportunities and then talk about accessible services. But again, I think the most important thing is that I do feel like we need more in regard to economic vitality.
I'm seeing head nods.
Okay.
Other comments on this section? No? All right. You can.
Okay. Second to last strategic priority, or yes, sorry.
City Administrator Moon.
I'm wondering if you might just spend a quick second telling us what you think, if you have something in mind that might be missing on economic vitality, to help us then go back to the staff groups and kind of brainstorm that.
Well, I think I need to think some more about something that, that we could add there, but we're only talking about an increase in a diverse mix of business and that support a local living wage. I feel like that's sort of a key piece of something we're already trying to do, and I just feel like we need to go beyond those doors. So I definitely can think about that. I don't have something off the top of my head right now.
No. Councilmember Ray?
I think we were playing chicken there. I think objective number one is right. I think that's something we need to do. But I think if we're going to achieve our, rolling all the way uphill to our vision of a robust, thriving community or whatever we finally settled on, that means that there's a lot of businesses coming to this town. And we haven't done a spectacular job historically about attracting some types of businesses. And so I'd like to, and I agree with Deputy President Batiste. I'm not sure I know what the words are, but it's bigger in scope than just supporting local living wage jobs. It's really about creating a economic engine here in town and building on our key anchor tenants that we currently have in town.
Councilmember Goodman.
We've also, residential development has way outpaced the numbers we're trying to get for commercial, and so that might be somewhere to start as well.
Council President Batiste.
I would agree, and that's some of I'm still trying to formulate my thoughts, but one of the things that I think is important is thinking about that particular issue, and that we have had so much residential housing, and just having commercial space and being able to attract businesses is important.
Do you want to go so far as to say that you want to balance jobs and housing?
Don't we already have that somewhere in one of our plans? It seems like
Exactly thinking, yeah, we are.
we've already stated that that's what we want. So
But I don't think because we've already stated it doesn't mean we don't amplify it here.
no, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that would capture a lot of what we're talking about, is to rebalance that. And it's something we are doing, but that doesn't mean it's not part of our strategy going forward. It absolutely is.
I think that might be a very good high-level, something that we could wrap in, and then as we get down into more of those tactics, we could have a good conversation around that.
So I'll paraphrase my old bumper sticker phrase, which is, we need to have jobs for the people who live here and housing for the people who work here, right? So we've got there's an element here for the housing for the people who work here, but what we don't have necessarily is the jobs for the people who live here, right? You want a community that is not connected to the outside, but is what's the word I'm looking for? Sufficient. It's got. Ideally, there'd be no traffic on I-90 in the morning because everybody who already lives here would be working here, and none of us would have to go into Bellevue or Seattle or Renton because we'd be sufficient here. You're looking like you don't understand what I'm saying.
I totally do understand. I just don't think it's possible.
Fair enough.
Because, that's what the Highlands was thought to be, and it's not what it is in that respect.
No? If you got sufficient, okay. So Administrator Moon looks like she's gotten the feedback for which she was hoping. So shall we move on? Or infrastructure, 2 to go.
A well-planned, designed, built, and maintained infrastructure system supports current and future community members. 2, supporting objectives.
Thoughts? Councilmember Goodman?
Well, I guess just the first comment I have is about well-planned, designed, built, and maintained. I think we mean to say it's well-planned, well-designed, well-built, and well-maintained? Okay.
Yeah, so there should be a hyphen in
Hyphens,
front of
all
each
those,
of
yes.
those words.
And supports current and future, I think is a little wonky. I don't know, something that takes us into the future. Anyway.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Which part is wonky?
That says supports current
Supports
and-
current and future.
Yeah, it's like there's two distinct groups, but I think we just want a system that takes us into the future.
I'm going to channel Councilmember Winterstein. I think there may be something here to make sure. I know his frustration with like county planning around the fact that we're always talking about the future. There may be an element of this is to say, and let's make sure that we address for current folks that there's a feeling that they're not. We're always talking about the future and not necessarily the people who are already here. I'm not disagreeing that it's a wonky language, though.
No, I appreciate that. I understand. I totally get what you're saying.
Councilmember Ramos.
Yeah, just looking at some of this in infrastructure, and we had some discussions the other day, we're looking at particularly water systems and those kinds of things, and some sort of sustainability, because I question, like, where is all our water coming from for our future development? Right now, the answer was kind of like, oh, well, it's coming from, the water supply, right? And I think overall, we have to kind of look at that a little more in depth, that has to be sustainable. Some sustainability with that of how far we can go. And particularly, I look at water in particular.
So I'll riff off of that. Resilience. I think that we need to talk about resilience. We are in an area that is, we are sitting on top of a surface fault. We have a subduction fault through this whole area. We have all measure of interesting natural disasters and potential man-made disasters. And I think having core infrastructure that is resilient, identifying the challenges to core infrastructure and having having plans to and making systems more resilient against those risks, I think should probably be a goal. Or not a goal, sorry, an objective. Councilmember Goodman?
Well, I'm not sure. I guess it just seems a little odd that, infrastructure is really important. I know that's a simple statement, and that we only have two objectives.
City Administrator Moon, do you want to speak to that maybe as to the process that we, or Director Fujimoto?
We just had one.
All right, I tried to get us to 3.
I'll just crowd the podium up here. So I think part of the thinking was that there are a variety of plans that are already in place for various infrastructure, water system plans, stormwater plans, sewer, et cetera. And really what the groups had identified was the missing link was the funding for the kind of ongoing care and maintenance of those facilities in a way that's kind of sustainable over time. And then really thinking about how all those things come together, in particular with the Central Issaquah planning area. So are we really designing and building those systems to meet our future growth needs in a way that's coordinated across all those different infrastructure pieces?
Thanks for that, David. Maybe there's a way somewhere in the objectives to acknowledge the planning that we already have in place and that we are implementing those plans?
Councilmember Ray?
Everyone had their lights on. 2 reactions. One is, when we talk about infrastructure, are we excluding roads and capturing our road network as part of transportation, or is our road system part of infrastructure?
So I would say it's a little bit of both. This is talking more specifically about how we're planning and maintaining. I just think it has a little bit more kind of on-the-groundness to it, and whereas the mobility sections about kind of multiple modes of transportation, how the system works together as a whole, some connectivity pieces, those types of things, different nodes that are being connected, how do trails connect to the streetscape plans, and then future light rail locations, things like that. So a little bit of a different focus, but certainly roads. So for example, pavement management would certainly be in this ballpark.
It would be helpful for me if we had more clarity about what the scope of infrastructure was and what the scope of infrastructure was not.
Okay.
And then I'm looking for something that, and maybe this is in one, but it's really we have a well-defined investment strategy for maintaining our infrastructure. So it's more than just, we got the plan for growth, but we got the plan to pay for growth. And then number 3 is related to objective number 2, which focuses on central Issaquah. And I don't know if that precludes or excludes the rest of the city, or if there's a special something about central Issaquah and infrastructure that makes it require its own objective.
I think from staff, when they're trying to hone in and be responsive to that kind of strategic nature of this, they identified central Issaquah as the area that really needed the most kind of focus and attention. It doesn't mean that those other areas wouldn't be addressed. It just meant that there needs to be some particular attention in that area.
Councilmember Ramos?
Yeah, as I think about that, if we're separating those two, I like innovative design, but I don't like that only attached to central Issaquah, because I think our other infrastructure can use innovative design as well. So if we're calling it out there, so even in our roads and other things, we can be innovative. Is my other thing. I don't want to lose that on that.
I think we've covered this topic. One more.
Very good. City leadership and services. Leadership and accountability is provided in the delivery of public services for our growing and diversifying community. For supporting objectives.
Councilmember Ramos.
Yeah, so I'm trying to look at this and see all the things we're supposed to be doing. Services is one thing. City leadership, one of the things we've talked about so much and try to work on so much is, community engagement. And I kind of see it here a little bit, community engagement and transparency. And let me include both those in there. And I kind of see them a little bit, but not as clear as I think we've spoke about them in the past. So in 4, you've got, we're transparent and financial, okay? But that's pretty specific to that one piece. So that transparency doesn't seem to apply to other things. And we talk about, really public engagement and so forth. And 1 tries to get to that somewhat, but somehow it's not quite doing it for me. It says they're easy, meaningful, inclusive, and diverse civic engagement opportunities for all. It seems like we're trying to get a little more active than just, there's opportunities for everybody. It's kind of like, I want to be known as the city that really has an engaged community and public that are engaged in all the things. And we're providing that in a way that is innovative and reaching out and doing more than just, hey, it's there. So it's, those 2 things of transparency and civic engagement, I need to get a lot stronger in here, because that's what we talk about, and that's what we want to do.
Further thoughts?
Yeah, I do, under the goal. I'm having trouble, the growing and diversifying community part of that feels a little forced to me. I think we should provide leadership and accountability even when we're not growing so fast, and if we're not diversifying. I think that's part of it. I don't think that those two things belong in the goal, but I think those elements belong in the objective somewhere. It's a little, it narrows it. It narrows the goal too much for me.
So would you just strip out for our growing and diversifying community? Just say leadership and accountability is provided in the delivery of public services? I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Good, oh, sorry. Oh, I was just going to say that good food for thought for when we have conversations about the specific language with all of you one-on-one, whether it's truncated or whether we include a nod to a growing and diversifying community in the goal.
Deputy Council President Batiste.
So I agree with some of the comments that have been made so far in regard to engagement. And then number 2, a collaborative work environment empowers employees, drives innovation, and sustains the city as a high-performing organization. I feel like that's a little bit difficult to measure, and I wonder if, I'm not sure I have the exact words to put there, but even, you know, something to strive for. I mean, that's great, but what is the pathway? And what are we trying to measure to show that the work environment has become more collaborative, or you know, what can we do to get there? Is something more measurable.
Councilmember Good.
So I understand your comments. I would like to see what comes out of this later as an action item. Because I was scanning through Cascade Water Alliance's strategic plan that they developed a few years ago, and they had similar objectives about employees, and they came up with some action items that were measurable. So I agree with you that it's too wordy, and I don't think we can measure all of that. But I think with the comments tonight, we could go back and figure out how we might maybe wordsmith that a little bit, and then see what we come up with for action items.
I agree with that.
Thank you, and thank you for the reference material.
Did you work on that?
No, I was, we'll look it up now.
Oh, okay.
Councilmember Ray.
So I want to piggyback on what Councilmember Ramos was saying earlier about civic engagement. I'd like to see some words about, you know, engaging with the public, where they are, when they want to engage with us, and how they'd like to engage with us. Instead of easy, I think we need to make it more about them. And then agree with Councilmember Goodman. I think that some of these things I don't believe all of our objectives have to be measurable per se. I think we have to get to the point where we have actions and targets that are measurable. So I am much more comfortable with objectives that are somewhere between measurable and aspirational. So I'm perfectly fine with some of these. I mean, we could wordsmith them to death, but we'll give you an opportunity to do that first. So thank you.
Other comments on this one? Nope. All right.
Oh, yes, good, okay. So a brief, sort of the immediate next steps in strategic planning that I can share, and then I think David's going to close us out with a kind of longer-term look at sort of the strategic planning process through the first quarter of 2019. So in the immediate next steps, we're conducting community vetting of goals and objectives. That is not yet live, so I think that 2019 is not quite accurate, but there'll be on Peak Democracy some vetting of all this material there so that we can report back on that, and we will be able to bring forward some of the high-level findings from that with you all during the one-on-ones that are being scheduled, probably already on your calendars. I think we've almost got everybody for October 1st and 3rd, which gives us sufficient time to be responsive to that in advance of your council meeting on October 15th, when we're hoping to, similarly to what we did today, kind of get the nod on sort of your approval of the goals and objectives, which will set up really allow us to launch into that final phase around actions and performance measures associated with each of these objectives. So that's really where we're headed right now, and I'm going to move this along to David's slide.
Excuse me. And I'll just say, sorry if you can't read this slide, but also rewinding back to the work session that's coming up on the 15th, I think we would be very open to any thoughts about how best to work through that content, just knowing that there's a lot of interest, and I agree with Councilmember Ray that the objectives is the place where it really matters a lot in terms of kind of where the focus and attention lies. But we do have 6 goal areas times 2 to 4 objectives, and that's a lot of content to work through. So if you have suggestions on that, definitely let us know. We'd be happy to entertain those and figure out how we can best move through that content. Now, having said that, what is maybe a little bit hard to see here is the bubbles are kind of the major pieces of the steps forward in our strategic planning process. And so we're at that vision, mission, and guiding principles. Thank you. We received a nice nod and appreciate your kind of attention to being able to get through that, because that really helps to put a stake in the ground and help us to move forward to the next step. As Councilmember Martz said, we really don't go through kind of final adoption of this until we have the plan fully assembled. So there is that opportunity as well. But because it's an iterative process, we really do need to have that kind of nod and able to be in order to move to that next step. Excuse me. So moving forward, and then the other piece I just want to remind you is that we've been working pretty intentionally to go through this process of community engagement, where up front we had a very wide, very broad community engagement. We took that content, distilled it, developed some content, and then kind of checked back, got a reading on it, and then made a final decision on it, or kind of to put the stake in the ground and move forward. And we're continuing to do that as best we can as we move through the process. And so as we go through the goals and objectives, as Gabriel mentioned, we are going to be releasing a survey on that out to the community starting tomorrow. And that's going to be out, and we'll have that content available for you for the next work session. And then we'll be able to take that content and move forward. But it's important because that iterative process takes some additional time. And so as we kind of move through deliberation on these different steps, kind of some changes in the sequencing really does affect the overall schedule. So as we move forward, hopefully we'll be able to move through goals and objectives in October. After that, we go into actions and performance measures. And currently, if we are able to move through goals and objectives in October, that does set us up for staff being able to work in those work groups on those actions and performance measures. And if that's pretty timely, we can probably get back to work session with council by the end of the year. If we kind of add some additional time in there, that probably pushes us out to January because of the timing of the holidays and other dates in there. So that's one point of note. Once we get through that piece, we're anticipating developing a draft plan in January, doing some internal review among departments. We're also anticipating developing a reader team with some community members who will be able to take a look at that and give us some feedback. And then going from there to work session, and then also out to the community for about a month to get some additional feedback. So that's all to say that even once we kind of turn the corner into January, there's still quite a bit of assembly and engagement as we kind of develop that kind of draft plan. That's when we're anticipating spending quite a bit of time out in the community, kind of widening our conversations with the community before we come back and hopefully adopt a plan. So all of that will take us through the first quarter of the year. Right now, we had anticipated adoption just at the beginning of that second quarter, which will lead us into the opportunity for planning for the 2020 budget.
Any questions from council? Oops, sorry, my mic was not on. No other questions from council? Do any members of the public who are here wish, I'm sorry, question, Councilmember
No, I
Ray?
just wanted to make a comment before we let David go. And that I think that we have invested, obviously, a lot of time and energy in doing this. And so one of the things that I would like to see come back at some point, and maybe it's much later in the cycle, but how do we use this to manage our business? How do we make decisions differently going forward? And, you know, how will we do business differently after we adopt this plan than we do today? So those are just some things I'd like to kind of throw out there for you to think about as we move this forward, because if we're going to do everything the same way, then it's
all
kind of
for
like
naught.
a bummer.
Thank you. Actually, one of the pieces that I didn't mention, and it's up here in the final plan, is the implementation framework. And that's all about how do we actually put this into use and into action. And that's actually a conversation we're going to want to start, obviously, before the final plan is drafted, and work through that conversation with council. We'll also be talking about it with staff and thinking about how does this change the nature of our work? How do we orient around goals rather than departments? How do we think about the connections to the budget? How do we think about connections to to the capital improvement plan? There's a whole host of things that we're going to want to take a look at and make sure that that's connected so that we can start moving towards those objectives. The city also has a lot of work that, as we start to think about performance measures, how do we set those in place and kind of work our way into it so that we know we can get good information but be successful at the same time. A lot of times that's an area where the whole thing can fall down because we could bog ourselves down in data, but we don't want to do that. So,
Any other comments or questions from council? No? I'll ask if any members of the public want to speak this evening. All right, 3 minutes.
I'll go fast. My name is Mel Morgan. I serve on the Issaquah Development Commission. A couple quick things. The verbosity of the goal for growth and development, I agree with Councilmember Ray. And I would suggest the words are there. If it just said growth is proactively managed to retain our strong sense of community and livability, I think that would get us to where we'd want to be. And in mobility, the goal there, getting around town, instead of the word easier, I would suggest efficient. It's not comparative, it's not easy, it's not hard, it's efficient for what you need to do. And then for people who live, learn, work, and play here. I think in all of this, we should always focus on live, learn, work, and play, all four of those things. And to that end, I know the ship has sort of sailed on the visions, mission, and guiding principles, but two words I didn't see in there in any of those were housing and education. Some discussions of living, but nothing but housing and education. In the online comments, I put some suggested language for prosperity that talked about live, learn, work, and play. If you'd like to go back and take a look at that, I think we do need to discuss affordable housing, and we need to discuss education somewhere in the principles. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. I want to thank 5 groups of people here tonight. First off, I want to thank the public for whom we continue. This is all anchored in the public input that we've gotten and we continue to receive. So keep staying engaged, and we will keep trying to stay engaged with you. I want to thank my fellow council members this evening. I think we had a challenge to get to specific language on some of these, and you were all 4 of you were always super engaged and riffing off of what each other were saying, so I appreciate that. I want to thank City Administrator Moon and Director Fujimoto. I put you on the spot at a number of times and asking you for your opinions and your thoughts. I want to thank the BDS team for facilitating this conversation today. And finally, I want to thank Mayor Pauley, who's been sitting in the back watching this whole thing. It must be so hard to hear us talking so much about things that she feels so passionately about, and she didn't even communicate any support or frustration for the things that she heard tonight. So. And with that, we are adjourned.